Lords of the Fallen isn't a bad game, but, and there is a but here, it isn't a great game. It's okay. If I'm to rate it fairly, as unbiasedly, as objectively as I possibly can, I can see its flaws, I can see its faults, I can see its shortcomings, and it would be a fair 7. Even if I like this game, if you want to go lower than that and give it a 6, I understand that. But you can't say this is 5 and below, because the game works, the game looks good, for those who enjoy the aesthetic, high dark fantasy aesthetic, and it sounds good. Let's get into the review for Lords of the Fallen. First and foremost, I must say this. I'm gonna stay as objectively neutral as I possibly can when it comes to this game, because that's how I really feel about Lords of the Fallen. Did I enjoy it? Yes. Was I frustrated at times? Absolutely. Did I felt that the game was a bit cheap? Yeah. I feel neutral about this game. I truly do. So I feel like my words have a little more gravitas to them. I'm using big words for no reason right now. So expectations were high for Lords of the Fallen, and it just didn't meet the bar. And I believe it got really close. It's just a few things are holding it back from meeting that same bar. First and foremost, Lords of the Fallen looks okay. It looks nice. I genuinely like this aesthetic. I can see what people are turned off by this aesthetic, but I genuinely do like this aesthetic. Dark high fantasy is my jam. Look at this armor. The Dark Crusader. This is peak armor design in this game for me. I don't know why. It's just that good. Environments don't look bad. Some of them, personally, I will say this, are over designed. Like, there's just way too much going on. Could explain why my computer sometimes just freezes or chugs and the game just crashes. I don't have the machine with the hardware to truly handle this game, so I will blame myself for it, but it crashed a few times on me for that reason. One thing I will admit, that if this is not your aesthetic, if dark high fantasy or just dark fantasy in general ain't your aesthetic, Shadow of Mordor type location, if you're not feeling this, you're not gonna feel it at all. But it's important as a consumer to know your biases and your aesthetic preference when reviewing a product. For example, if I don't like Italian food and I go to an Italian restaurant and I still don't like the food, that's me. I know what I like and I know I'm not going to have a good experience here, and I can't judge that harshly on the location or the product itself. But if I can cosplay as a Dark Crusader, oof, yo, it looks so good, yo, man. Oh, I'm not sure if I love his armor more than Guts. I'm not sure, but it's, I'm getting off topic. Let's talk about music real quick. This is going to be the shortest section here because music is a mixed bag. It's what I expect to hear from FromSoft games, but I felt like I already heard these tracks before. I'm going to play a couple songs and you tell me which one's from Elden Ring. The correct answer is none of them. None of them are from Elden Ring. But you can feel the inspiration. You can see the similarities. But that's why the music is serviceable. It just does what it needs to do. we're going to talk about what I really like about Lords of the Fallen, because there's a few really good ideas that I think should be praised. First and foremost, ammunition. Oh my god, I love it. I genuinely love it. It's a different type of ammo that's used up from the ammo bar. It is in the same place as your mana bar, but now you got ammunition. I genuinely like this because it's one less thing to farm. I don't have to farm throwables because I have a set amount, and to replenish it, I can use an item, which that is farmable, so there is still some farm in this. And more importantly, I can just sit at a lamp and get it all back at once. This really complements melee builds that don't have much of a range option besides taking a bow or a crossbow out. And the way you deal with a lot of enemies in this game, you're gonna want some range option to pick some off or to draw aggro away from the crowd. Another thing I love about this game is how they handle gray health and shields. Shields do not block 100% of physical damage at all in this game. Even the best shields only hit up to the 75, 73 mark, I don't remember. You're always going to be taking damage when it comes to blocking anything. Alone, that will completely and utterly suck and fail. But when you block, you now get gray health, depending on how much damage went through. That gray health can be recovered as soon as you slap an enemy. You can see where I'm going. Your job is to block and damage enemies non-stop to keep your health top off. It's a way to encourage more aggressive play. I enjoy this system because it's a way to clutch out a boss or an enemy encounter, and when you land a parry and have a bunch of gray health, that's essentially a free heal. There are 3 unlockable classes in this game, and I like 2 of them. I hate one of them. This class, it looks cool, but it feels like it's just a basic class you start with in the game. Not that big of a deal. The other 2, which I'm not gonna spoil, these are the names. Okay, so I am gonna spoil. They're worth the effort. And now the reason why my computer cannot handle this game is the Umbral dual world system they got going. I love the lamp. I love what you do with it. Even though you just point and shine a light and burn most things or pull things, it's still pretty nicely done. The astral layer that it cups from just wanting to see the world through the Umbral lens is fantastic. Most games that do this dual world system usually do it from a set location, a la Silent Hill. You're going to do it in certain locations for certain points. Another example would be Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds. I like that you can do this anywhere throughout the whole game to not only traverse, find shortcuts and secrets. Pretty damn good, right? What you expect from it, they use it very well. I think you should have more Umbral moves with the lantern, you know, let's like shoot a blast or something. I just want more combat options for this instead of just pulling the souls or shining a light on some parasite that you just have to look for. What takes this system, this lamp, this Umbral world to the next level is that you can be forced into Umbral if you don't want to be. This sucks because enemies don't stop spawning, enemies get an increased aggro range, and eventually there's just so much for you to do. You want out as soon as possible when you get forced into Umbral. You just do. Staying there for too long is not an option. Throw in an annoying enemy type like the Reapers, and you can see how this really makes an engaging experience, even if it's a bit annoying since enemies don't stop funneling into you. Also, I like the idea of getting up after you get knocked down, you know, Shakiro Shadow Die Twice style, or the Challenger and Remnant. Okay, for me, honestly, that's all the good in the game. Let's talk about some of the negatives, right? Let's talk about some of the sore points of this game. First and foremost, I have to say, there's just simply too much enemies in this game. I had to get used to it, but enemy density has a cascading effect on the game that does drag it down a bit. First and foremost, the game feels a bit slippery at times. You can dip in this game, you can run. Even with a giant stack of armor, you are a fast boy. And it feels like you're skating on the floor, especially when you're in combat. Souls-like are known for having precise control, calibrated movement down to the wire in the step. In Liza P, with good placement and good movement, you can just walk in and out of attack range while dealing with enemies. And you can do that here as well. The issue is that there is so much enemies that you don't really have the opportunity to do so. At any given moment, you could be fighting about 2 to 9, even 12 enemies at once. To make my point clear and why this is an issue moving forward, I have to use Elden Ring as an example. In Elden Ring, you can fight upwards to like 20 enemies at once. Granted, they're father enemies and they don't do much, but you can still fight that many enemies at once. This happens all the time in Elden Ring. You're going to be clearing camps and fortresses. The issue with Lords of the Fallen is that you don't have the same tactics that you do in Elden Ring. You can't get on your horse and run away. You have to deal with that. You can't just sneak around and get backstabs all the time. Enemies get aggro together. And if you get pulled into Umbral, enemies do not stop coming. In this regard, the game feels cheap because it feels like it's throwing everything in the kitchen sink at you all at once. In Elden Ring, if an area is simply too hard for you, you can go bend your forth and come back when you're ready. In Liza P, the game doesn't expect you to take hordes of enemies at the first few areas of the game. Enemy encounters are a breeze. Lords of the Fallen says, hell no, you are a one-man army fighting army all the time. It has you fighting archers, the bomb squad, fire flaming dogs, snake with art bows, a lot. I'm not going to harp on this point, but it has you fighting a lot. This affects the game negatively in two major aspects. One, people get frustrated all the time. It's not new into a Souls-like genre. In fact, we expect this. If I don't feel frustration in these games, I am either a god or it was too easy. But from what I hear on the grapevine is that this is a little too much and overwhelming for people, especially veterans of the Souls-like community. I can understand where you're coming from. I played Lords of the Fallen 1 and it doesn't feel nothing like this. That being said, I haven't played the game in years. Take that with a pinch of salt. So that is the point of these games, right? To frustrate the players and to give them a challenge. But if the challenge becomes cheap, then people will put the control down. There is a balance that needs to be struck when it comes to these types of games. The best example being Melania, the Queen of the Rock. She's cheap as all hell. Guys, she is cheap as all hell. But by the time you get to her, you should have all the tools in your disposals to trivialize that fight. Magic, items, summons, and co-op can make that fight super easy, barely an inconvenient. In Lords of the Fallen, you start at the back foot, or it feels like you start at the back foot, and you have to work just to get some even grounds with the enemy. And if you have a good build, but the late game, you're just decimating your enemies. And if you're looking to buy this game, which I do recommend, please start with the Preacher class. Radiant scales amazing early game and it continues to scale better in late game. Furthermore, you have the tool to deal with a lot of the nonsense the game throws at you in the early hours. Now, enemy density has a negative effect on bosses as well, right? It's a lot more straightforward than the last point. This being that since you're used to dealing with 12 enemies at once coming at you from all different directions, dealing with Umbral being forced upon you and you trying to get out of that, it's a lot. It really is. But now that you have a 1v1 with someone with a decent moveset, the game feels a lot easier because you're used to dealing with a lot more. And that's a sign of you, the player, getting better at the game. And you wouldn't think about it in that manner because you're just like, well, these bosses aren't challenging. But these bosses, they're not bad. Especially some of the designs, they look pretty cool. And if you're a veteran of the Souls-like formula, there isn't much you haven't seen already when it comes to tall enemies with weapons. That's mainly what we fight in Soulsborne. So what would the developers do about this? Right? How would they tackle the issue of enemy density? First and foremost, take away 15, maybe even 10% of the enemies in the game The annoying ones, you know, the dogs that breathe fire, the archer, those guys, coupled with a couple of the foot soldiers, the game will be better for it. If you feel like taking away those enemies will make life a little too easy for you as a player, the devs can just make it for you to take 7% more damage across the board. After that, I believe you can add those enemies back into the game at New Game Plus and higher. That way, you already know what you're doing, you already have your build, and this remixes the enemy encounters for New Game Plus. That way it feels a little fresh when you're going back to it. That's really all I have for Lords of the Fallen. It's a good game, it has its good points. I really like the Umbral world system. Really wish we can do more with the lamp. Like we use a special move that knocks or kills some enemies around us, but forces us into Umbral. I know that there's more that can be done there. Genuinely love how they handle ammunition. It's not a new thing, but it's a good thing. Yet, I understand why players can put the game down before you even get into the good part. It throws a lot at you, and it forces you into cheap scenarios where you're in the back foot, and that can be tiresome and very frustrating for some players, which is why they will put the game down and pick it up again. That being said, I think the game is good. I think it's worth a fair shake. I think if the developers nerf it a bit, it will go a long way. Players playing and to soften its reputation. But that's it. That's all I got. This has been Definitely Not Bots. If you liked the video, give me a thumbs up. If you disliked the video, give me a thumbs down. What do you think of my solutions? What do you think of my critique? Let me know in the comments down below. But whatever you do, make sure you have a good day on purpose. And I'll catch you on the next one.